So Nick, maybe you just want to start out with a little bit of an introduction about yourself. Why are you here? What you're working on?
Yep. Well, thank you for letting me come and speak today. So, Nick Adams, I'm London-based. I'm the Vice President for EMEA at Globalization Partners, or GP, as we are now. Abbreviated the name to make it a lot easier.
Like abbreviations always help, right? So look, as I said, it's becoming more and more competitive in the landscape across the world. Companies have to present themselves as the most attractive option, right? So it can get really challenging as you have this dispersed workforce all across the globe. How do companies stand out? What do they need to do to kind of rise to the top?
So I think since the pandemic, companies have realized that workers prefer to be remote or at least hybrid. So this is definitely a trend. So 3 out of 4 workers would prefer to be out of the office either completely or partially. And 2 out of 3 businesses have taken note of that and will actually cater for that now. But having a remote business is fundamentally different. There are many more advantages than disadvantages to that. But I think you have to fully understand the situation. You have to look at your business and the workers involved to really be able to decide if it's something that would work for you.
Great. And look, I know it varies based on the stage and where you're at, right? And on that, there's just a ton of data. There's a lot of research that's been coming out around remote work, certainly in the last number of years, especially as companies and researchers really try to scramble what's effective, what are the strategies that work, what doesn't. What have you seen out there as people here might be trying to figure out how they can support remote work in their own organization? How do they evaluate whether that's a viable option for them or not?
So it's a good question. I think you have to look, again, at your business and at your people in the business. So certainly for back-end functions, so where there's a lot of processing, administration, payroll, those types of things, they can be carried out pretty much anywhere. There are other functions that may be more customer-focused as well, so help desk as an example. And again, I think where you may have previously thought about putting that into your bricks and mortar, you don't have to these days, and there's great pockets of talent all over the world. We've done a lot of research at GP, and actually we have this on our website, so I'd recommend you have a look at our Globalpedia. But for example, if you're looking for tech talent, there are hubs of amazing skilled graduates. Mexico City is a great example. 1 out of 5 graduates in Mexico comes out with a technical qualification, obviously bilingual or trilingual. You pay them less, which is a benefit as well. It's not the whole reason you do it, but that is a big advantage of it. I think for some businesses where they have roles where they really need to have people in an environment together, having obviously that remote workforce probably isn't going to work so well for them. The other thing you have to also look at is if you are building a team and it's cross-border, is you have to take into account that there are going to be a lot of variations in labor laws, tax laws. We see companies, for example, a UK company who's employed somebody in Ireland on a British employment contract. Now, you can't do that sort of thing. You have to obviously make sure that you're fully compliant in how you pay people as well. It has to be in local currencies. Just understanding things as well, like sickness, severance. There's a lot of legislation around that. So I think you have to be eyes wide open. First of all, how to choose the markets that you want to get into. You have to do a lot of work to understand what's the competitive nature in those markets. Can you as a business operate with people there as well? If it's in a very different time zone and the language is an issue, then think twice about it. You have to make sure that you can support those workers well, and there's a whole different art to managing a remote workforce. Ensuring that you're catering for their cultural nuances, making sure that the times of the day that you bring them into meetings, it's going to be very different as well. So lots of factors to look at. You have to do your homework when you get into the markets. You have to make sure you're fully compliant when you do that. Our business model is based on us being able to do that for our customers. So we would actually hire the worker directly into our entities. So we registered our business in pretty much every country out there. And then we will make the payroll. We'll make sure that they manage compliantly.
Definitely. So some big questions there. Definitely some things to consider. I see some folks even taking some notes down. Look, I mean, as we said, really ultra competitive right now across the world as people fight for talent. Does this remote working have any effect on retention? I mean, once you've gotten these people in, you found them, whether it's Mexico City, the other part of Dublin, how do you bring these people in and how do you make sure that they're retained inside the company, they feel engaged? What are some things that you're seeing and things you might be able to share?
So I'll start off just talking about acquiring talent, and then I'll come on to retaining the talent.
Sure.
So the first part There's this myth about the war for talent, and I think that was very true when you are looking at locations like London. If you're looking for skilled roles and you have a very short geography that you're looking at, there is a war for talent. But our understanding and our belief and our mantra is that if you're willing to look further afield, cross-border, there is a lot of talent out there. I've given an example of Mexico. I could give you so many examples. Sri Lanka is another one for accounting talent. Businesses like HSBC in the UK, they hire thousands of people each year in Sri Lanka because they're so well qualified. So again, first thing is to look at your markets and where the talent is, and then I think you'll find that this war on talent actually is not such a big battle after all. The next thing is, successfully onboarding, managing the talent, making sure that they're happy what they're doing. The problem with remote workers is they are much further off. You have to be able to make sure that you really are comfortable, that they are satisfied, that they've been listened to, and that they're engaged. Engagement is huge, and there's so many ways you can now increase that engagement, and that's probably a whole different area to speak about.
Sure.
In terms of retention, I think it's much easier with the remote workforce. Apart from anything else, people like being remote. So before GP, I was with a business where we had a lieutenant from the Navy who was running the company, very regimented. You'll be in by 8, you can't leave until 6. Day after day, and if you look at a remote company, you don't have that commute. You normally get to work in a much more asynchronous way as well. So everybody has objectives, you have metrics, you know what you need to achieve, but you can structure your day typically, so you can decide how you want to work, when you want to work, where you want to work. You go for a run. I went for a cycle the other day and did a conference call. It's acceptable these days, and if you have a pet or a kid on the Zoom call, again, it doesn't really matter these days. Companies are okay with that. So I think the attraction is there. People typically want to work remote. It becomes a little bit more difficult if it's one person isolated in one country and they're not coming into head office, they're not meeting other people. So again, you have to pay attention to who you're recruiting. Are they a self-starter? Are they disciplined? So slightly different mindset when it comes to working for a remote business.
Sure, and I think for me, the two things that definitely stand out, one, tools. You could absolutely stand up here for an hour and talk about remote tools and how to engage with people. The second one there is flexibility, right? So as you try to provide more flexibility and do this, how much is too much? How do you really draw the line for employers and for companies that you're supporting?
So in terms of flexibility, again, be very careful with setting your metrics, your objectives. I think one thing, just as a side note, is if you are employing people remotely, it's really important that you have a policy around that. A lot of people think if you can work remote, you can be anywhere, and that's not quite true. You have to be normally within the same tax jurisdiction. Within the US, you have to be in the same state, as an example. So, where people can work, the expectations around that, travel, again, we find at GP, although we're a totally remote business ourselves, we do require people to get together from time to time. So again, you have to really make sure that you spell out exactly what remote work is and what the expectations on the individual are. In terms of the flexibility, it depends on the role they're doing. In a sales environment, they probably have a certain number of orders to sign and win and process. In help desk, it's probably about number of customers that you've managed to help and triage. So depends what the metrics are. Depends how senior the individual and experienced they are as well. So one of my teams at GP tends to be a much more experienced team. They're further in their careers, they're very self-disciplined. So we really allow them to work autonomously, whereas other teams may be more junior and they need a little bit more oversight.
Definitely. So definitely going with wide open, having a plan in place, right? Don't just jump right in head first. Let's ask the questions. Let's get there around it. Can you give us some examples of companies you may have worked with? Maybe there's some use cases out there that people can maybe be able to emulate and see in their own selves. Who you work with, sort of some successes maybe you could share.
Yeah. So we have thousands and thousands of customers. They range from very large organizations. Zoom is probably quite a timely one to talk about. A lot of communication these days is done virtually. We help them in many countries where they have, it's relatively small teams. They don't want to go through the effort of setting up an entity and having to manage that. It's actually more cost effective to use an organization like us. And then we go all the way down through to young businesses, so startups, scale-ups. Typically when they've received a funding round, they've got their Series A to Series D. They want to go and set up. They want to enter multiple markets at the same time. using our model, we can do that very quickly. If you're looking to set up an entity, it can take a very long time. So, again, plan your markets very carefully. If it's somewhere like India, Russia, China, it can be 12 to 18 months until you're actually at the stage that you can compliantly hire somebody. We can do that because we're already set up there in as little as a few days. So that's one of the reasons a lot of businesses come to us.
Great. And so again, we've asked a lot of considerations, a lot of really good tips there to kind of consider. If we're to start from kind of day one, right? You have someone who's come in, Series A, they're talking to you guys for the first time. What's that process like? They're considering remote working. Where do they start? How do they build this effective global team? What does that maybe look like as you're coming in approaching this for people here?
Sorry, just repeat that. A bit.
Sorry, so if you're walking through that process, right? You're starting from, you want to build a remote team.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What's step one? How are you getting going?
Okay, so if you haven't hired cross-border before, and I say cross-border, it could be, for example, within the same jurisdiction. Again, you have to be careful on where you're choosing. So if it is outside of your country, just be very careful about understanding that market. It's really difficult to get back into a market if you've been in there once, you've tried, it hasn't worked, and you've exited. It makes it twice as difficult to do that again. So the preparation around that is immense. You have to really have confidence that there is a market for your products. You have to decide if you want to sell direct or do you want to go indirect as well. You can go through channel. That's another option that's available. Once you've identified the market, then what are the roles you're going to recruit for? And again, in the recruitment process, you'll probably look for a different set of abilities. It's not just about the education and the experience. It's about can this person work autonomously. We've been remote since our inception, which is 10 years ago. And I think we've hired very well. Certainly, we retained extremely well our staff over time. And I think that is paying attention to, when you are hiring, ensuring that people give you that reassurance that they are self-disciplined and able to carry out missions without being micromanaged. Again, looking at the compliance factor is huge. So if you are going to go into market and you are going to set up an entity, there's typically a lot of expertise that happen around that. You do have contractor models available. However, a lot of different countries are tightening that up. So we have IR35, for example, in the UK. You have to be very careful with contractor misclassification. Because if you do get judged that you're employing people as contractors, but they're not real contractors, there can be big financial penalties, both for those individuals, but for the employees as well. So again, route to markets, the right type of people, and ensuring that you're employing or hiring them on the right basis.
Sure. And Nick, I might throw a curveball at you here. I know that you'd mentioned your website for some resources available. Is there any other places you'd recommend people go and fish for some of this information? What are some good resources that might be out there? Anything that you might point people towards?
Yeah, great question. So we have a Globalopedia, which again is on our website. So for every country, we give a free resource to talk about what are the considerations there, culture, what do you have to think about when it comes to hiring people, anything from maternity and paternity and holiday, so PTO as it's called. So that resource is absolutely available. We have a great network of partners. We have 400 partners out there as well. So if it's a question about, how do you put inside equity schemes, how do you set up those entities? What happens when you reach that stage where you get to what's called permanent establishment, which is where you have to actually have a local entity and declare local taxes as a corporation. So we can use that partner network, we can make those introductions, and we're more than happy to do so.
Absolutely. And look, I know that we've covered off a lot of really important considerations for people that are coming in. Storytelling is such a powerful tool here. Is there anything that you've seen, big mistakes, questions that people didn't ask that they couldn't go back on? What are some of the mistakes that you would say people should definitely try to avoid, the things that are just going to absolutely kill it dead in the water for people that are going?
I think I've mentioned some of them already.
Yeah.
I think the naivety of some people, unwittingly, that they can maybe just hire somebody abroad and pay them into their bank account remotely, and they sort of forget the whole tax side of things. Some younger businesses who are very early out in terms of managing a business and really understanding everything that goes around that do make these little mistakes. So I would say seek advice, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that, and we're more than happy to talk to companies about that. paying people in the wrong currency, not doing the taxes, putting them on an employment country that's not compliant for that jurisdiction, hiring the wrong type of people. And it does happen. I mean, sometimes a company will go out and hire someone and it's not the right individual for a remote type environment. But saying that, I think it is the way things are going. We firmly look to what we call the future of work and the whole digital nomad. There's no doubt that the way the world is going and legislation is loosening up to allow us to get to the point where we will one day be able to work anywhere, anytime, for anyone and get paid any way we want. That's the holy grail, and I think workers are pushing the boundaries to get there. So we have to be able to support that. Technology has developed amazingly. I mean, you just look at this event and all the fantastic vendors here. We have, the internet is really being scaled up to allow that virtual communication. So the technology, I think, is getting there. The laws are getting there. We can pay people in their local currencies or via crypto, whatever they want. So we are moving in the right direction. And in answer to your question, I think we just need companies to be eyes wide open, do their homework and the research to make sure they're not falling afoul.
Definitely. And I know we just have a couple of minutes left. If you're looking ahead, right, if we're going to jump to the perfect scenario, future of work, can you explain to me what that might look like? I mean, you talked about some of the systems and tools. Maybe it's ubiquitous, being able to move between jurisdictions, frictionless, right? For you guys, when you talk about an end state for companies that you might be working with, what does that look like? What's the vision that you're selling to them and telling them that this is what your life could be like after you figure this out?
It's a great question. So, I mean, there's no doubt the gig economy is going to continue to grow and grow. There are some really good workforce planning tools out there that allow organizations to be able to advertise a job and a skill set and then have individuals just click it for a day. We already see some of this being trialed in the US. There's some great organizations. Kroger is a good example of one who are trialing this now, where they can just, if there's somebody calls in sick and they need a resource there, they can just post it out and somebody who has relevant experience can just apply for that job, they can do the work, and they can get paid the same day. And I think that's where we're going, is this flexibility and agile capability of organizations to load balance. The UK is not too bad, but we have some great freedom of working there, but when you look at continental Europe, for France as a great example, it's really difficult because you don't have the ability to scale up and down your workers so easily. So I think what we will see is organizations being much more open to looking at gig workers, people who aren't perm for their organization, letting them come in, work a day here, a day there, and again, paying them as soon as they've completed their work. So agility, freedom, I say those are the big words, all being underpinned by great technology and laws that are slowly changing to allow us to work this way.
Well, I'm certainly really excited for what the future has in store for all of us. I think just with the little bit of time we have left, is there any kind of final words, nuggets of wisdom, anything that you've seen that you think the people here who are trying to think about this should consider, think about, leave today's session, if there's one thing they're going to take away, what would that be, and maybe closing it out for us?
Well, I guess the piece we haven't really spoken about is the whole, when you find someone, the onboarding and how you maintain that consistent communication with individuals, and this goes back to the retention piece. What we do at GP is we have a buddy system when somebody starts, making sure that they have somebody they can go to. It's not going to be their manager. It's going to be somebody maybe in a different team, but on the sort of similar footing as them. Someone who can really do that pulse check, making sure you're doing lots of surveys and outreach to find out, what is the mood in the organization? What are the areas that annoy individuals? Where are the areas for improvement? So just listening to your workforce, it goes a long way to that retention piece.
Definitely. Well, like I said, I'm personally, onboarding is the single most important touch point in that career life cycle, right? Like, it's the ability to build that trust, the loyalty, and really establish that culture from day one. Nick, like I said, it's been a pleasure getting to chat with you, even backstage. I know that there's probably loads of questions from people out here, but thank you so much for the time. I really just want to say thank you to everyone here. Let's maybe get up for Nick one more time. Nick, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Thank you.